Oops, got to turn this on. We saw yesterday that Hashem created a miracle in the temple, that the Aron and the Kruvim did not occupy any physical space. It's a miracle. Someone who asked me yesterday, why would Hashem do that? Perhaps it's to demonstrate that this is totally outside of the physical realm. This is something that's kulo ruchani. It's completely spiritual, and therefore it doesn't occupy any space. So if you were to take a tape measure from the wall of, remember the Kodesh HaKadoshim is 20 by 20. You take a tape measure from the wall to the Aron, and it's going to measure 10 amos. Take a tape measure from the other side, and it's going to be 10 amos. So where's the space? That's the miracle. And we said both the Aron and the Kruvim did not occupy any physical space. So Misayeh leila Rabbi Levi. This supports Rabbi Levi. The Amar Rabbi Levi v'itema Rabbi Yochanan. Davar zeh masores biyadenu me'avosenu. Makom Aron u'Chruvim eno min hamidah. That the place of the Aron and the Kruvim is not included in any of the dimensions of the floor plan of the Kodesh HaKadoshim. It doesn't. It's a miracle. Tanya nami hachi. The Brisa says the same thing. Aron sha'asa Moshe yesh lo revach eser amos l'chol ruach. That the Aron that Moshe created, there's 10 amos in all directions from the Aron to the wall, which is impossible if it occupies any space. Amar Rav Noi, Amar Shmuel, Kruvim b'nei sein omdim. As we're going to see in just a minute, when it says that the Kruvim were suspended through a miracle, what it means is that the body of the Kruvim also did not occupy any space. And when we talk about the body of the Kruvim, what the Gemara is going to illustrate is that the wingspan of King Solomon's Kruvim, which were standing on the floor, extended from one wall to the other wall. The only way that they could stretch from one wall to the other wall and not crash into each other is only if the bodies of the Kruvim did not occupy any space. And the Gemara demonstrates this from Sukkim. Shenemar v'chamesh amos kanaf ha'kruv ha'echaz, v'chamesh amos kanaf ha'kruv ha'shenis, eser amos mikitzos kanafav v'kitzos kanafav. The pasuk in Melachim, or that is actually in Melachim, which describes the dimensions, it seems, at least this is the way the Rishonim seem to learn, that the Kruvim, if you walked into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, you come in from the east, you're facing west when you walk into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. The two Kruvim are facing you with their wings spread like this. Okay? Their wings spread like this, and they're turning towards the Aron, like this. Their heads, their faces are turning towards the Aron, but they're facing as statues like this. This is not normally the way we conceive of the Kruvim, because this is different. These are not the Kruvim that Moshe made, which are on top of the Aron, but these are Kruvim which are full statues, which are standing on either side of the Aron.
What happened to those Kruvim that Moshe did?
It's a good question. Someone asked me the essay. I don't know. They may have.
The Aron is the same.
It seems like the Aron is the same.
No, because I thought they made it from one piece.
Right. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. So the Kruvim are, the pasuk describes each wing as being 5 amos long. So if you have a span of 2 5-amo wings like this, that's 10 amos, and then you have another angel next to it. Their wings are hovering over the ark, like underneath the wing is the ark, and then the other angel is touching that and then also spreading 10 amos across. So the Gemara's question is, Gufaihu, so that's the question. Gufaihu heichahavu kayami, elashma mina b'nei sein omdim. So where were their bodies? There's no space for the bodies. Yes?
Like some airplanes. So with some airplanes, the wings start from the body. For some other airplanes, the wings are above.
Okay. Chakei rak shniya. We're going to get to that in just a second. But anyway, the Gemara's havamina is that just like a human body, the arms come out of a torso, so too the wings came out of the torso of the Kruvim. So the body of a statue has to occupy some space, but there's no space available if the wingspans of each angel are 10 amos each. So the Gemara then says, Maskif la Rav Acha bar Yaakov, Maskif la Abaye. V'dilma bolton ketar negolim havukaim. This is what Dr. Isilis was just saying. that maybe just like a chicken has wings coming out of its back, not out of its sides, maybe that's the way the wings of these angels, the wings came out of their backs. And therefore, they connected at the back, so you don't have to account for body space. Okay? So, maskif larava, the dilma zeshalo keneged zehavukaim. And maybe they were staggered, so that they're both facing the same direction with wings like this, but maybe one's in front of the other. So they overlap. So that's not a problem. And maskif larav acha bar Yaakov dilma ba'al chesona havukaim. You can see the diagram in the bottom left corner. It says maybe they were positioned across the hypotenuse of the room, diagonally, which is therefore there's much more than 20 amos space because of the Pythagorean theorem. Okay, so maskef la Rav Huna bered Rav Yoshua v'dilma beisa me'iloi ravach. I'll give you another solution. Maybe 20 by 20 only when you take the ceiling measurements, but it tapered out the closer you got to the floor. So maybe there was more than 20 amos available at that point in the height of the room. Maskif la Rav Papa v'dilma mechaf avu kaifu yadayu. Maybe the angel's wings were bent in some way, so that if you bend a wooden bar, let's say at an angle, it won't be as long as it is when it's completely horizontal. So maybe the angel's wings are bent downwards somewhat, so to accommodate that for that extra space. And maskif la Ravashi v'dilma shalchufi hava mishalchufi yadayu. And another answer could be is that maybe very similar to what Rava was saying, not that they're staggered, but that they're exactly flush against each other, but at least the wings were like clasping each other, holding each other, like two people shaking hands. So there was overlap also. So you don't have a raya just because the wings are measured 10 and 10 that they couldn't have overlapped in some way or made up for the body space. So the Gemara now asks, Keitzad hein omdim. How were the keruvim situated as far as positioned vis-a-vis each other? So Rabbi Yochanan v'Rebbe Lazar chad amar pneihem ish el achiv, v'chad amar pneihem laboyis. So we have a machlokas. One says that the faces turned towards each other, and the other opinion is that the faces turned away from each other towards the walls. Well, Laman Domer Pneihem Ish El Achiv. Now, why would that be? Like, I certainly can understand looking at each other. It's love between God and Israel, of course. Turning away from each other, why would that be a desirable thing? Well, perhaps it shows kavod to the aram that even the kruvim would not gaze out of respect upon the aron or over the aron. Maybe that's the pshat. Let's see. So I'm not sure. Let's see. Okay, the Rashbam doesn't tell us why that would be. But anyway, Ulaman Domer Pneihem Isha Lachiv Haksivu Pneim Labayis. Okay, now if you learn that they were facing each other, what do you do with the pasuk in Divrei Hayamim, which says that their faces were facing away towards the wall? Lo kasha kam bizman she'yisrael osem ritzonu shel makom, kam bizman she'en yisrael osem ritzonu shel makom. So the answer is that really, when the angels' faces were first fashioned, they represented the love between God and Israel, so the two angels are facing each other. But when the Jewish people turned against Hashem, they turned away from Hashem. Hashem created a miracle that the Kruvim represented that and caused their faces to turn away from each other. This is a very famous Gemara. Now, if you learn like the other opinion that says that their faces originally were fashioned facing away from each other, how then Moshe's Kruvim that he fashioned were facing each other? Why would Shlomo build it differently? The answer is the mitzadei yatzadudi. So the Gemara answers no. Really, there's value to them facing away, but there's also value to them facing each other. So therefore, they were fashioned in such a way that the faces were positioned in such a way that you could perceive them as looking away, and you could perceive them as leaning a little bit towards inwards as well. It's almost like, hey, do you know what time the ball game is today? Like you lean over to someone and say, but your face is turning away. So why would that be? So the Tanya Unkelis Hager Omar, that's how people talk in shul. That's how I know it. Right? Anyway, the Tanya Unkelis Hager Omar, Kruvim Ma'asei Tza'atzu Imhein Umitzudadim Pinehem Ketalmid Hanifter Meirava. that the Kruvim were fashioned with children's faces. Tza'atzu'imus are playful children, right? And their faces were positioned as if they were turning away, but not turning away completely, like a student who's taking his leave from his Rebbe. Meaning that he's walking away backwards from his Rebbe, but at the same time he's got to make sure that he's not going to trip on a rock that's behind him. So he's turning a little bit this way, but saying, Shalom Rebbe, and he's slowly turning away. So that's the way the Keruvim's faces were
But
situated.
any turning away at all is a negative, is that correct?
See, but that's the point. I try to anticipate that issue. How could one man Amar say that their faces were turning away? That's not desirable according to what you're suggesting.
Turning away from what?
So
From each other.
that's the point. Turning away from the Aron is a sign of respect that we shouldn't be, even Kruvim shouldn't be looking directly at the Aron or over the Aron. It could be that's a sign of respect. That's the point I'm trying to make. Anyway. Mishnah. Let's go on to the next Mishnah. Mishi yesh lo bor lifnim mi beiso shel chavero nichnas b'shah shederech b'nei adam nichnasin v'yotzei b'shah shederech b'nei adam yotzei. So we had learned before this whole discussion is a person moicher ba'ayin yafe ba'ayin ra'ah. When one person owns a property and he sells the bore rights that are situated on his property, so he's essentially selling the bore. Does it have to be explicitly stated that he's selling access to the bore or not? Let's say we've dispensed with that issue and the buyer of the bore has access to his bore. But let's say the bore is behind Ruvain's house and Ruvain sells the bore to Shimon. The only way for Shimon to get to the bore is got to walk through Ruvain's house. So the halacha is Shimon definitely has access rights, but he can't come at 3 o'clock in the morning and say, I'd like to get some water from my bore. So therefore, the halacha is that he has to come at reasonable hours when people normally frequent houses coming in and out of the house. And furthermore, you can't abuse the privilege of access by schlepping your goat through this guy's house because it wants to get a drink of water from the bore, but rather you fill up a kli from the bore and bring it outside and let your goat drink it. And each person, meaning the homeowner and the bore owner, have to make a lock to access. Now, what does that mean? The Gemara now is going to explain. Posachas lehecha. Each one's lock goes to where? Amar Rabbi Yochanan shneim labor. So Rabbi Yochanan clarifies. He says, look, the back door of the house opens up to the bore. What we're saying is that door has 2 locks, almost like a security deposit box. It's got 2 locks on it. One, the bore owner has the key, and one, the homeowner has the key. So the Gemara says, Bishlam abala bor boy lishtamuri maya debore, elabala bayis lamalei. So the Gemara says, I can understand the owner of the bore has rights to lock the door because he doesn't want the balabas to take his water. But why does the balabas need to be able to lock the door? Also, Amar Rebbe Lazar, Mishum Cheshad Ishto. So the answer is because it's not proper. Let's say in the middle of the day, the husband's at work, the wife's at home cleaning the house. The owner of the bore knocks on the door and says, excuse me, Mrs. So-and-so, I'd like to be able to get some water. And she says, okay, come right in. That could lead to really significant problems in halacha, right? Yichud, worse things, So therefore, we only want the bore owner to access his water at a time when the balabas is home. So there won't be problems between the bore owner and Mrs. Balabas. So that's why the bore owner basically you can only access your water when I'm home, is basically what the balabas is saying. And that's why I have a key. Okay? That's the reason. Let's go on to the next mission. Mishi yesh logina lifnim miginaso shel chavero nichnas b'shah shederech b'nei adam nichnasim v'yotzei b'shah shederech b'nei adam yotzei. So Reuven and Shimon own ginot. They own gardens. Let's say vegetable gardens, flower gardens. These are gardens that are typically used, as you'll see in a moment, they're used to harvest the vegetables or flowers and to sell them. And Reuven, the only way that Shimon can access his garden is through Reuven. And of course, Reuven gives him access. However, Shimon can only access, walk through Reuven's garden at a time when it's normal for people to walk through the garden, at a time when there are people in the field. But at 3 o'clock in the morning, he can't just schlep through Reuven's field. Ve'eno machnis l'socha tagorin. And furthermore, the only rights that Shimon has is for he himself to go into the garden. He's not allowed to bring in a bunch of Japanese purchasers to come into the garden so that they can see, look at these beautiful red peppers that I'm growing. Because it's too much trampling through Reuven's garden. So you want to show the merchandise to your buyers, so take out the vegetables to them, don't schlep them into over Reuven's garden. V'lo yikanes mitocha l'toch sadeh acheres. And furthermore, even if Shimon is going himself to his garden, he only can access through Reuven's field if it's to be able to access his garden for agricultural purposes. But let's say Shimon, his house is in front of Reuven's garden, and the shul, there's a shortcut to get to shul by walking through Reuven's garden and walking through his garden and get to the shul behind Shimon's garden. So that's not okay, says the Mishnah. You can only trample on Reuven's field in order to access your garden. That's what it was given to you for, the rights of access. But to use it as a shortcut to get to a place behind Shimon's field, Shimon, you're not allowed to do that. V'hachitzon zoreya es haderech. And then the next thing the Mishnah says is, who has the agricultural rights to that pathway that's running through Reuven's field? We already learned that Shimon has rights to use the pathway for access, but who has rights to plant his flowers or whatever he wants to plant on that pathway? The answer is that Reuven still retains the rights. It's still his field, still his property. But that's all if the pathway runs straight through the middle of Reuven's field. Then Shimon's rights of access are much more limited. But what if they both agree that Shimon will have a pathway on the side of Reuven's field? So it's not as cumbersome, it's not as intrusive to Reuven's work, right, for Shimon to walk through the field. And therefore, he can walk through any hour of the day. It's not going to intrude on Reuven's privacy, it's not going to intrude on Reuven's work, and therefore it's perfectly fine. Umachnas l'socha tagorin. And Shimon can also bring his buyers on that pathway because it's not trampling on Reuven's stuff. However, Shimon can still not use that pathway as a shortcut. In other words, we've lifted some limitations, but it's not completely unlimited. There's still some restrictions. And in that situation, neither Reuven nor Shimon are allowed to plant on that because it's considered to be completely seeded, C-E-D-E-D, for the purposes of Shimon's access. Therefore, even Reuven knows that when he gives him something on the side of his field, he's not losing out by not planting on it because it's not ramish straight through the middle of his field, and therefore neither party plants on it. The Gemara now says, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Ama beis hashlachin ani mocher lecha, no sin lo beis amos l'socha, va'ama mikan la'agafeha. Now, Shmuel is basically stating that there are halachos governing when a person sells a waterway that runs through his property. You can call it an aqueduct, you can call it a stream or a brook, and basically water rights are very valuable. So basically, Reuven is selling to Shimon the rights to a waterway that runs through his property. But Reuven says, I'm going to sell you an Ama Beis Hashlachin. And that term refers to a very robust body of water that can be used to irrigate an entire field. And so therefore, the minimum birth of that stream has to be 2 amos wide, plus Reuven has to give land rights to Shimon of an amma on either side. And as Rabbeinu Gershom says, Shimon has the rights to use that to, let's say, create a higher embankment for the body of water so that the water will continue to flow without flowing over on the sides and without caving in. Okay, so that's the first thing when the term is Ama Beis Hashlachin. Now, Ama Beis Hakilon ani mocher lecha. No lo ama echas l'socha v'chatzi ama mikan v'chatzi ama mikan la'agafeha. But if he says, I'm going to sell you a base kilon, now a base kilon is a smaller body of water. Just trying to remember what the word kilon means. Let's see here. let's see, does the, oh, he says, yeah. Some say it's read as Ama Beis Hasilon. And therefore, he says, it's not for irrigation of land, it's for giving water for animals and to do laundry. That's what it's used for. So it's less of a body of water. You don't need as much water. And so therefore, the guarantee has to be that it's 1 amma wide and a half of an amma of land on either side that Shimon has the rights of use. Va'osam agafayim mizorm. So now the question is, well, Reuven is retaining rights to the property. He's only selling the water rights to Shimon. Plus, he's got to let him use the land on either side to create embankments. But who gets to plant on that strips of land that are right abutting the river? After all, one would think that there's a lot of moisture there, so it's probably a good place to plant, right? So Rav Yehuda Omar Shmuel Balasada Zoram, Rav Nachman Omar Shmuel Balasada Notam. They both agree in the name of Shmuel, these two Amoraim, that it's the rights of the landowner to plant on them. But the difference is, what can you plant? So Rav Yehuda quote Shmuel as saying you can plant seeds, like for growing vegetables and flowers and things like that. But Rav Nachman quote Shmuel as saying you can only use it to plant trees. So what's the difference? So the Gemara explains, Man do omer zoram kol shekei notam, man do omer notam aval zoram lo chilchuli mechalchule. That there's a difference. He said when you plant a tree, everyone agrees that that's okay because the roots of a tree will not in any way create an erosion of the banks because the roots will go deep down and they won't in any way disturb the flow of water. But when you plant vegetables or other kinds of plants, the root system is much shallower and it's going to aerate the soil. It's going to create holes in the soil which could cause greater erosion and a collapse of the banks of the water. And therefore, that Man Omer who quotes Shmuel that way would say only trees is okay to plant, but you can't plant vegetables and other stuff. The Omer of Yehuda Omar Shmuel, Amas Hamayim Shekolo Agafeha Mesakna Me'osasada. Why? Biyadua Shelo Kolo Agafeha Ela Ba'osasada. Rav Yehuda quoting Shmuel, and there's different ways perhaps to learn this, but the way I understand it is, why is it that the Bryce or that we had said before that a person who buys a waterway has rights to use the land that's immediately adjacent to it? The answer is because the field is responsible for the erosion of the waterway. If the waterway's banks erode and collapse, well, that's the landowner's fault, so to speak. In other words, it's the land's fault that natural erosion occurs, and therefore, since it's his land, he has to make up for it by letting him use the land to re-embank the waterway. Okay, so maskif lo Rav Papa v'lei malei meyecha ashpelua la'arech. So the Gemara says, why can't the landowner say to the guy who owns the waterway, he says it's the water that washed away the soil. So it's not the soil's fault, it's the water's fault that it caused the erosion. So therefore, our conclusion is that the reason why the landowner has to give up some of his soil has got nothing to do with whose fault it is, but rather Ela Amar of Papa, Sha'almanas Kain Kibel of Balasada. That was the condition of the sale. The condition of the sale was implicitly that if there is any erosion of this waterway, you'll get to use the surrounding soil in order to re-embank the waterway and to make it whole again. That's the reason why. Not because it's my fault or your fault, but rather because it's understood that it's meant to be a long-term sale, that you can use this water.
Is it a bank and an amma after the bank, or it's an amma including the bank?
I think that's what the bank is. The bank is this 1 amma or half an amma. That's what a bank is.
For the bank.
No, there is something confusing here because Amma Bet HaShlachim, Rashbam says Amma Bet HaShlachim. It's not Amma as a length.
That's right.
But then they
It's a
say
waterway.
Amma as a length. So
Right.
the same word.
Same word is used differently in the same Gemara.
Yeah,
Right.
in the same sentence.
Exactly. Right. Let's go on to the next mission. Mi shahaysa derech harabim overes l'soch sadehu natlav and asan laheminat sad mashanasa nasan v'shalo lo higio. So it's a very interesting mission. There's a guy who has a piece of property, let's say a cornfield, and for years the public has been walking through his cornfield because it acts as a shortcut to get from one thoroughfare to another. And he says, he becomes an Oiber Chacham, and he says, you know what I'm going to do? I don't want it walking straight through my field. I want to have full use of the field. So I'll divert the walkway and I'll make a new path for the public, and I'll tell everyone to walk on the side. So he creates a new path. So now you got some people walking on the side, some people are still walking in the middle, even though he puts up signs and everything. So what's the halacha? He wants to stop people from going through his property. So the halacha is, says the Mishnah, too bad. Not only does the public still have rights of access through the middle, but now they have a second access because you've created it, you've given it to them to use from the side. So you've basically lost out. Not only can you not stop them from going through the middle, but you have to also let them use the new path that you've created. So we're going to explain, the Gemara will explain in a moment. Derech hayachid daled amos, if you sell someone a pathway for only an individual to walk through, so the sale is implied that it's a 4 amma wide pathway. You can't limit him to less than 4 amos because people have apparatus that they travel with. If I'm a farmer and I need to schlep from one side of your field to the other, I'm going to have to take my plow, my wagon, and everything. So that's 4 amos. Derech harabim sheish esrei amma. Let's say you sell to a municipality. They buy, right, eminent domain, we call it, right, where the government can just seize a pathway. But here, it's, let's say the municipality purchases it from a person. We want to purchase a public pathway through your backyard. So you have, if the deal is struck, then the balabas has to give them a 16 amma wide path, because that's what the Gemara in Shabbos defines as a rishus harabim. Derech hamelech ein lashir, and derech hakever ein lashir. Now, there are 2 pathways that the owner of the property cannot restrict at all. Can't restrict it to 4 amos, can't even restrict it to 16 amos. One is the pathway of a king. If a king says, eminent domain, I need to walk through your property, the king can say, my entourage is 100 amos wide and you can't stop it. And similarly, if there's a funeral procession that needs to get from wherever the mace is to the Beis HaKvaros, and they need to go through your property, you can't restrict how wide that procession goes. And the Rashbam says, Chazal made that takana for kavod hameis, to show respect for the dead. We don't restrict the procession in any way. The last line of the Mishnah is very cryptic. We'll have to wait till tomorrow's daf to understand it. Hama'amed, which is an action which we haven't defined yet, Dayane tzipori amri beis arba'a kabin. The dimensions of that action are 4 kavs of floor space. And the Gemara will explain what that means when we get to it. Let's first take a look at the Gemara. Amai shelo lo higio. Amai shelo lo higio. Why is it, says the Gemara, that a person who tries to stop the masses from passing through his field, why didn't the Chachamim that he should be able to give people, that he should be able to divert the pathway of the public and have them travel to the side? Why did Chazal take that away from him? Linkot pizara v'lesiv. What's wrong with him just taking a stick and standing at the entrance to the middle of his field where people used to pass through and basically say, no entry, and if you try to get past me, you're going to get a zetz. Shamas mina lo avid inish dina l'nafshi afilu b'makom pseida. Is this to suggest that a person is not allowed to protect his property even if he's going to incur a loss by invasion of his property? Why can't a person put up a no trespassing sign? Since when can a person not do that? So the Gemara ends. What?
In Florida,
Oh, yeah, the good old boys. Yeah, they stand with the shotgun in front of their property. Yeah, try to do that in Canada. You'll be in jail, lickety-split. All right, so Amar Rav Zvid Mishmei Derava, Gezeira Shema Yitein Lahem Derech Akalason. So Rav Zvid basically works under the following premise, that once rights of access to the public have been established, a person cannot claim, oh, this is going to hurt me, it's going to hurt my property, but I'll make a different accommodation. Why? Because we're concerned that by you creating that alternate accommodation of a pathway for the Rabbim, you're going to create a walkway that will be crooked or curve, and it's going to make it more inconvenient for the public. Before, it was only, let's say, 1 kilometer to get from one end of your property to the other, but now that you've created this curvy pathway to circumvent the field, it's 1.5 kilometers. It takes an extra 0.5 kilometer. That's not right. The public has a right to the. So that's our concern. And Rav Mesharshi Mishmei de Rava Amar Binosei Lam Derech HaKalason. He quotes Rava differently. He says that the only time that our Mishnah says that you don't have a right to divert the pathway is only when you create a longer path. But if your alternate path is exactly the same length, then it's perfectly fine. The Mishnah does not object. And on that, Rav Ashi disagrees. He says, Rav Ashi Omer Kol Minat Tzad Derech HaKalason Hi Krova Lezeh Rechoka Lezeh. So he says no. By definition, anytime you change the pathway by moving it a little bit to the right or a little bit to the left, you're invariably inconveniencing someone in the Rabbim. Because if one guy lives a little bit to the east of where the pathway is, and you move the pathway a little bit to the west, he's now got to walk further. For me, but I made a convenience for the guy who lives in the east. But too bad, I have rights also. So everyone in the Rabbim is going to claim, no matter how you move it, even if you move it just a little bit, it's invariably going to inconvenience one person of the Rabbim, and therefore we don't allow you to move it at all. Once the Rabbim have established a chazak on that property, we don't allow you to move it. So the Gemara will continue this discussion, Amir Tzashem, tomorrow. Anyone saying Kaddish?